How's it, everyone? Welcome to another racket review right here on OpenCourt. I'm Kent, and today I'm reviewing a racket that has actually been around for a few years. I believe it may have actually been released first in Japan, but I've never gotten to try it until now. That racket is the Prince Twistpower X100 Tour. So let's check it out. So before we get into this review, I want to give a quick shout out to Albert Murata over at the AMStringing channel. His channel's link is down in my description below. Thank you so much, Albert, for sending me this racket. He's over on the Big Island of Hawai'i. He's a distributor of Prince. So if you guys are looking for Prince products, or if you guys are on the Big Island, check out Albert Murata's shop and check out his channel. You're awesome, Albert, so thank you. Okay, so this Prince Twistpower. So let's address the elephant in the room. What is unique about this racket? Well, obviously, if you take a look at the shaft, the throat over here, it features a very unique twisted design. It's almost as if like the Hulk just grabbed the racket and went ugh, and just twisted the shaft like this. So what is this twisted shaft supposed to do? Well, basically, it's supposed to flex and bend a little bit more optimally. So when you strike the ball in the string bed, this unique twisted design is supposed to bend from here and meant to slingshot the ball back with more power. So this is kind of in the tweener racket frame, as you guys will see when we look over the specs. But basically, that's what this twisted throat design is supposed to do. It's supposed to get more flex and more power. It also features something called the triple tube technology, which is just foam infusion infused inside the frame to help improve the torsional stability upon impact so the racket doesn't twist in your hand. And by staying stable and not twisting, you're able to retain that power and redirect it with more force. So the triple tube is supposed to also help with power and stability. This racket is meant to be for intermediate to advanced level players. This is typically not quite the specs I look for. I look for something a little bit heavier, a little bit more player frame oriented, but I was very curious to try this because I remember seeing a couple of my students in Japan playing with this a few years ago, and I was like, what is this thing? What, did you get angry and twist the racket or something? But this is apparently how it was designed, so I was very curious. So with that said, let's first take a look at the specs. Here they are. So they're basically in the tweener category. It's a 100 square inch, 10.6 ounce. So it's around that pure aero, pure drive spec range. The beam is a little bit thinner, which is nice because that'll give me a little bit more control. And it's a 16 by 18 string pattern. So it's a pretty open pattern. So it should get a decent amount of spin and power. So I asked Albert to string this up with my current favorite Prince string, the Vortex. I will do a review on the Vortex a little bit later. But he strung this up at 54 pounds. I usually string at 52, but Prince Vortex is a softer string and this is a more powerful racket, which is why I'm guessing Albert strung it at 54. Albert is awesome. He's been stringing and customizing rackets for a long time, so he knows what he's doing, so I trust him. So finally, after all these years, I get to try the Prince Twistpower 100 Tour. So let's get on the court and let's see how this plays. So let's start with the pros of the Prince Twistpower X100 Tour. Although this racket says Tour on the label, which is typically on the heavier side, this racket felt very light and fast to swing. The listed weight is the same as the pure drive, pure aero type rackets, which puts it squarely in the tweener category. So let's answer the question of whether the twisted shaft technology works or not. And to be honest, I did feel quite a bit more power and penetration than I thought I would get. Usually, a lot of these things are gimmicks meant to sell more rackets, but in the case of the Twistpower, I did notice a bit more flex. This was most noticeable on my flat serve. When I flattened out my serve and I struck it high above my head, I could feel the racket bending and launching the ball like a slingshot. This meant I had great pace on my flat serve, which is something I often struggle to produce because of my shorter stature. But aside from the flat serve, I'll be honest, I didn't really notice any difference in the flex or feel of the Twistpower compared to other rackets I've played with. Sure, it has decent power, but on ground strokes, it felt no different from a pure drive. My thought on this is that if you often play against harder hitters who hit heavier balls, the heavy pace could cause the Twistpower racket to flex more and launch the ball off with more force. But I don't play against people who hit very hard, so I didn't notice more flex during rallies. Only on my own serve and the occasional return of serve did I notice the racket bending like it's advertised to. But regardless of whether the technology works or not, the Twistpower packs a punch from the baseline and it helped me to hit passing shots or to set up approaching the net. It actually took me a bit of adjusting because the open 16-18 string pattern sent a lot of my shots high and long, but once I tried shortening my backswing and approaching the ball with a more closed face, I was hitting forehands that penetrated and pushed opponents around the court. I usually don't advocate for rackets that require an adjustment, but with the Twistpower, I didn't have to change much. Just the angle of my takeback on my forehands, and the results were undeniable. I especially liked rallying from behind the baseline with this racket because I could take a slightly bigger swing and attack the ball aggressively. I think the beam width reins in some of the power compared to other tweener rackets. The Pure Drive and Pure Arrow are some go-to tweener frames, and they have a thicker midsection around 3 and 9 o'clock than the Twistpower, so the Twistpower is not lacking in control compared to Babolat rackets. The spin is also very generous because of the open string pattern. Interestingly, I would actually feel comfortable recommending this frame to someone who swings more vertically a la Nadal. That's because the open pattern will provide topspin to drop the ball inside the baseline, and by swinging up instead of through, the danger of flying the ball past the baseline decreases. The spin potential was also very noticeable on my kick serve. I felt the strings moving a lot anytime I struck my kick serve in the upper area of the hoop, and I saw my ball diving inside the service lines. Serving was my favorite part of this playtest, and I felt I could hold serve a lot easier than the previous racket I tested, which was the new Head Prestige Pro. The feel of the Twistpower is very unique. I actually thought it very similar to the 2nd gen Babolat Pure Strike, which is my current favorite Babolat racket. That racket, also known as the Project 17, has a very hollow feel, meaning whenever you struck the ball, the vibrations feel pronounced, but the frame doesn't feel solid, as if the racket is tubular in construction. It's hard to describe when I put it into words, but those who know what I mean can probably relate to the hollow feeling rackets. This isn't a bad thing for me. In fact, I like this kind of feeling because the vibrations allow me to feel when I've struck the ball in the sweet spot, and I can hit my touch and finesse shots easier than a more muted or dampened racket. I like to go for short angle ground strokes, and the feel of this racket helped me to aim for smaller targets, although this frame is by no means as surgical as something like the Prestige Pro. I like the hollow feel of the Twistpower at net. The racket had enough power to the point where I could punch volleys for winners or use placement and hit into open spots to force mistakes. I don't usually have the level of volley control with thicker frames that I got with this Twistpower, so that was a nice surprise. I did struggle a little on high backhand volleys though. For some reason, I just couldn't get the timing right. The weight seemed a bit off and I hit a lot of high backhands into the net. But low volleys were pretty easy to dig up. The feel and power allowed me to punch low volleys deep to push opponents behind the baseline, and oftentimes when I did that, they popped up a lob which I could easily smash with the power of the Twistpower. And lastly, it's been a while since I playtested a Prince racket, and I gotta say, I really appreciate the grip palettes of Prince rackets. The Twistpower had a long, slender handle, and it made it easy for me to switch grips from semi-western to continental, and I could find the bevels easily. Not a huge concern for most people, but since I playtest so many rackets, I noticed these things and I was so happy to hold another Prince racket in my hands. So now let's get into the cons of the Prince Twistpower X100 Tour. The first issue I had was that I struggled with consistency on my backhands. For some reason, the swing path on my backhand ground stroke felt a little awkward, and I often hit the ball straight into the net. I had the same issue when I playtested the Diadem Elevate 98 at the beginning of this year. The forehand felt so good, but I was making so many mistakes on my backhands that I became timid, and that caused my misses to increase. The best way I can describe it is that the swing felt a bit sluggish, as if the racket's construction doesn't allow for aerodynamic acceleration. My backhand is more flat, so I hit with an open face with the racket being perpendicular to the ground. It just didn't feel like it was cutting through the air well, and I hit a lot of backhands into the net. Second issue I had was with the slices. My backhand slices sailed really high because of the open pattern. I had a hard time using this on offense because if I wasn't careful, I would watch my slices sail long. This is one of the reasons I love tighter patterns, and the Twistpower just didn't do it for me on slices. Playing defense in general with this racket was a chore. I couldn't use my touch and feel to hit defensive shots where I wanted to with the trajectory or direction I wanted to. I would often miss wide whenever I tried to pull a slice cross court or when I tried to hit a running forehand across my body. Lobs were also a bit harder to control. Admittedly, lobs are a very small component of my game, but slices are a major component and I didn't feel in command with my slices or my defensive game. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, this racket took a bit of an adjustment. Although I got the hang of it pretty quickly, whenever there is an adjustment period with a racket, I will generally always mention it in the cons because a racket or string should conform to your game naturally and seamlessly. Otherwise, that gear is probably not best suited for you long term. I struggled with the launch angle with the Twistpower at the beginning and I had to shorten my backswing and approach the ball with a more closed face. If I wasn't careful, I sometimes hit the frame because my racket face was so closed, I would shank shots to the fence. If you don't like really open and powerful frames, I think you will face the same issues. So now let's get into who the Prince Twistpower is for. I believe this racket is for players who want a powerful tweener frame but want something with a bit more control than a pure drive. Ironically, I actually think someone who plays with a pure Aero or VCore 98 might also feel at home with this racket because the open pattern will get plenty of spin for vertical swingers. I don't recommend this racket to hard flat hitters. Also, if you like hollow feeling rackets, this one might have the response you're looking for. So all in all, this racket performed just about how I expected after seeing the specs. I appreciate this racket leans a bit toward the control side among tweeners, but I still can't see myself switching to something like this because I want more surgical precision for my placement and finesse game. But it is indeed a powerful racket, and if you want to dominate your opponent with power, give it a try. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the Twistpower. I know Prince rackets are hard to find, but they are still good frames, so if you can, give them a shot. Thank you for watching this review of the Prince Twistpower X100 tour right here on OpenCourt. And thank you, Albert, for sending me this racket. Check out his channel, AMStringing. His link is down in my description below. And as always, if you guys like this content, be sure to overhead smash that like and subscribe button to keep the reviews coming. And I'll see you on an OpenCourt.